Please be seated. Welcome. My name is Lee Fithian. This is Ryan Sturdivant. He was my senior assistant for pre-calculus this year. Also joining me on the panel this evening is Mrs. Mary Henson and Mrs. Corey Telshaw. If you would join me in a word of prayer. God in heaven, we thank you for this moment to share with all who are present. Please guide and lead Ryan as he shares with us. Grant him clarity of thought and expression. Please use his words to grow each of us closer to you. Thank you for your Son and the freedom that he gives. Amen.
Now, about 5 years ago, I was at a robotics competition with a bunch of the other robotics kids. There was about 400 people crammed into this cafeteria. We were about 2 hours out before a match, and this guy gets up on the microphone. He asks everyone, ladies and gentlemen, we're having a lot of hot spots that aren't necessary. Could you all please just turn them off? Pull out my phone, check. It wasn't me, okay. Get back to doing whatever I was doing. He gets up there a second time, says the same thing. We say, all right, whatever. Again, not me. Gets up there a third time, tells us, turn it off. We're not asking, turn your hotspots off. I pull up my phone again, wasn't me. He gets up there a fourth and a fifth and a sixth time before he is screaming into this microphone, just yelling at every single person in there, every adult, every parent, every kid to turn it off. And I can't do the full scream because I have a microphone on me, but you can imagine how loud it was in that gym or in that cafeteria. And I tell this story a lot because there's extra bits and I find it hilarious. But I don't normally tell the ending because what happened was my team went to compete and we saw another robot not work. We saw robot after robot after robot stop working. And what was happening was our robots actually emit their own Wi-Fi signal. And our controllers pick up on that and they connect. And the problem was the controllers were actually connecting to stronger Wi-Fi sources, the hotspots. And so instead of controlling your robot, you were stealing Karen's data. And it did. It delayed the match. It caused problems. Teams were getting 0 points in a match, and it was constant problems. And all of a sudden, this crazy guy yelling at us was, okay, he was still a crazy guy yelling at us, but he made sense at least. And that's what I want to talk about today, is how my perspective changed, and therefore so did my understanding. And again, my argument today is that to best understand someone, we need to see from their perspective. And once we better understand them, we can communicate better. Now, let me start by asking, what are perspectives? A very simple question, but for some reason it's confusing because multiple different definitions have popped up. Merriam-Webster uses prospect as a definition, while Oxford Languages states that it's a point of view. Immanuel Kant writes in Proglemma to Any Future Metaphysics, that's the most I've practiced, any title of great books, he states, all our judgments are at first merely judgments of perception. Now, what that meant to me, at least, is our perspective is built from our perceptions of reality. It's just a culmination of different events. And for this speech, I'd like to use the Britannica Dictionary's definition, which states perspective as a way of thinking about and understanding something. Simple, yet descriptive. Perspectives are unique to every person and affect everything we do. They tell us what to give attention to, how to interpret events, what our attitude towards an event may be. And because we only experience life through one perspective, we have those singular attitudes, singular interpretations of events. A book introduced to me by Mr. Fithian, The Social Styles Handbook, states, your perceptions of yourself and your own social style may not match what others see. I'll go over what our social style is later, but the point stands. We have a singular point of view, and we see everything from one side. Now, understanding perspectives is beneficial. Understanding different perspectives is beneficial because it removes what I see to be the biggest barrier in communication, misunderstanding or not understanding people. Now, different perspectives can mean that people define words differently. They may have different experiences or hold entirely different values. For example, if I'm talking to a lactose intolerant person and I'm offering her ice cream, I'm not going to make her like me. It just doesn't work. In that, I'm neglecting to see their perspective on what's tasty or what's good. The Social Styles Handbook, again, states things break down most often when those signs are misread or not misread at all. Those signs being perspectives, and what breaking down is communication. To better illustrate my point, we can look at ways to actually see things from different perspectives. Many different tests are administered to see the mindset of someone or how they think, such as the Myers-Briggs Personality Type Indicator. I didn't practice that one as much. And I find this one ineffective in communication because it takes a long time to recognize a different personality type and then adapt to it. The one that I found most helpful was the social style matrix. It's simple. It only organizes people into 4 different categories: driver, analytical, amiable, and expressive. It organizes these categories by just 2 metrics: assertiveness and responsiveness. A person's responsiveness is how we express feelings related to tasks and people, and a person's assertiveness is how they influence people and tasks. Now, I tried to get a neon sign for y'all, but the school wouldn't allow that, so you're going to have to imagine with me. But the matrix is built like a plus sign, with the 4 quadrants representing the 4 different categories. In the horizontal direction, you can tell where they lie by asking, are they more people-orientated or more task-orientated? This allows you to say, oh, that's up and down, I'm sorry. And so if they are more people-orientated, they'll fall on the upper half, and more task-oriented, or if they're more people-orientated, they'll fall on the bottom half, and if they're more task-orientated, they'll fall on the upper half. Again, with the horizontal direction, that tells us tell-directed assertiveness and ask-directed assertiveness. You can ask that by saying, are they more likely to tell someone what to do in a situation or ask them what to do in a situation? Both of these are very easy to recognize in a conversation and allow you to pinpoint where they are in one of the 4 categories. If they are more task-orientated and people, or if they're more task-orientated and tell-orientated, they're going to be in the driver category. If they're more task-orientated but ask-orientated, they're going to be in the analytical. Again, for people and tell, that'll be expressive, and people and ask, that'll be amiable. Now, another thing to think about with this is people often shift to different categories whenever they're under different mindsets or different stress levels. I, for one, am more analytical, but in the bus barn for robotics, I become more of a driver, just to necessitate the needs of the events. And again, these are very easy to recognize in a conversation and can help us adapt to it. Let's take, for example, a driver needing to communicate to an analytical-minded person that, say, a deadline is due. With practice, once they recognize that it's an analytical person, it can be easy for them to recognize that they need to put their thoughts into patterns, into step-by-step, into clear goals as they go along. If, however, we take an expressive mindset having to communicate to a driver, they would need to state goals, one goal, and make it clear. This comes with practice, and it goes over it in the book, but I can't talk about that all day. Now, while the social styles matrix is an incredible tool for understanding people, it can't do everything for us. Let's take, for example, a talk about religion. A driving Christian is going to struggle to talk to a analytical Hindu because they're not going to have the same patterns, the same step-by-step. Again, with an expressive Christian and a driving atheist, it can be hard to express goals or facts whenever they fundamentally disagree on what facts are true. I believe we need more tools. That's where I believe Mr. Herman Eben comes into play. He is the founder of GR8 Solutions Group and a part of executive management at Pioneer Natural Resources. He's a wonderful speaker, and he's the author of Servants Leading Servants. I got the privilege of interviewing him this spring break, and whenever I asked him about communication and talking to, say an atheist, his main advice was to ask questions after questions after questions, meaningful questions, that is. And I believe that this is the other tool we need. I can talk about and say an entire oral on asking questions and present it, say, at Friday at 3:15, wink, wink. Now, I will end by directly quoting Harvard Business Review. Questioning is a uniquely powerful tool, and questions and thoughtful answers foster smoother and effective interactions. I believe that with these 2 tools, we can start to see from someone else's perspective and begin to communicate better. I want to return to my example of the Christian and Hindu from before. A common focus point among religions is what happens after death. That's one of the first things we go over in our apologetics class. Now, if the Christian is talking to the Hindu again and sees through their perspective, starts asking them questions, starts understanding, he can see that the Hindu holds death as a cycle rather than something else. He could see that, and he can start putting step by step his thoughts that are understandable to the Hindu. And again, for the Christian and atheist, he could look through his perspectives, learn, ask, and see that it's the end, it's utter end. And he can present facts and goals more aligned with that idea. And finally, I want to quickly look at what happens when perspectives are ignored, because I have tried communicating with both, and without seeing perspectives and seeing perspectives. It's night and day for me, at least. I chose this topic specifically because I wanted to be better at communicating. I'm stubborn. I argued with a brick wall before, I'm pretty sure. And it got really bad to the point where I was sabotaging a lot of conversations in robotics and especially at home. A lot of conversations with my father would go, wrong because he would tell me something and I had made up my mind before he actually finished. I knew I was right. Absolutely, utterly right. And in my eyes, I was. But looking at a different perspective, it makes it clear that I'm not. It's obvious that I'm not right. And now, I'm not going to pretend to be amazing at this, like coming down to tell you all how to be better. But I just wanted to explain how it's helped me and what it's done for me in seeing different perspectives. It's helped my conversations in school, in robotics, and at home go a lot smoother. Thank you.
You checking the time?
I wasn't sure how long that would be, so.
Good job. How does it feel?
I got months leading up to that 15 minutes, and it's done. It's like climbing a ladder to a slide, and the slide is 2 foot long.
That's a wonderful analogy. Thank you very much, Ryan, for sharing that thought. So what are your plans for after graduation?
This summer, I'm trying to help out at a robotics camp, but after that, I'll be going to School of Mines in Colorado.
Excellent. Congratulations. It's very exciting. You kind of shared this. Is there anything else you'd like to explain on how you picked this topic, or if you had other topics in mind?
A big reason was because I wanted to communicate better, but also because, as you know more than anyone, my original topic, I wanted to talk about some controversial subjects, and the reason I actually didn't was because I knew the instant reaction wouldn't be, oh, okay, let me listen to him. It was, okay, no. And so I did. I kind of thought about, okay, that would be my reaction. How can I fix that reaction? And that's why I looked into this and said, okay, maybe I could look into this and maybe I can do this. And it became this, or it became talking about perspectives.
Yeah, I'll say I did not see this topic coming when I first met you.
Me neither. Don't worry.
I was very pleased to have gotten there. Okay, so do you know your Myers-Briggs?
I don't. It's INT. I don't remember the last. J? I hear J being yelled at me.
J.
It's just Price is Right, whenever you're trying to guess the number, or the price of it, and everyone's yelling different prices. I'm going to say J.
J. Yeah, I think you said you're an analytical. I agree with that. Very much so. Okay, so let's talk about perspectives a little bit. Does it matter if your perspective is correct? And by what I mean, what I'm trying to ask is, if I believe something that's just patently false, what role is that going to play in a conversation?
If you're believing something false, it's going to lead to problems. But I believe that's the point of a conversation, is to talk about what is true. Or some conversations, not all, but some conversations are there to decide, okay, well, I believe this, and the other person can say, okay, I believe you're wrong, I believe this. And that's where conversations can lead to is, well, why do you say that? Well, I say this, and this, and this, and it becomes a conversation.
Let's see. Okay, here's another question. Perspectives and values. How do you relate those two?
I believe our values come from different perspectives. I had an analogy for this earlier, because I thought about this, but I can't remember that analogy at all. I know, I came prepared, don't worry. Our values they come from our perspectives of things. If someone lives, say, in Africa, right, or in a poorer part of Africa, right, they're going to value food and water. They're going to value that a lot more than someone here, because I can drive 2 minutes to my local Can't Quick, wink wink, and get food, right? And so you hold different values based on your perspective of what's in your life.
Fair. Okay. How hard is it to see the perspective of another person?
I believe it depends on the person. In social styles, they talk about how communicating with a specific type of person, like analytical, the opposite of that is expressive. And so it can be harder to talk to them, and I believe that can play into it, or maybe they just have a very, very different perspective, and that can be difficult. And it really does depend on the situation. Because for some people, like if I'm talking with my friends, I share a lot of experiences with them, and so I already have at least a similar perspective to them. And so that can make it very easy to start seeing from their perspective. But, again, I could meet an alien who has completely different perspectives, and he could dump me on an island somewhere, and it'll be hard for me to see that perspective. But
yeah. In my mind, you're about to go to a different state, to a different school, and you'll have many chances to practice this.
Yes, sir. That was one of the things going to Colorado. It's like, Colorado's weird, right? It's like, that's the fun part.
Yeah. You might not go in with that, like, as a shirt. Okay, so I'm curious, what role does humility play on both sides of the conversation?
I think you do have to definitely be humble to be able to say, okay, I'm going to look at this different perspective instead of just focusing on your own. You have to be willing to accept the possibility of different perspectives, or accept that there are different perspectives, and those perspectives are right, in their own way. And so being able to say, okay, I'm going to look at yours first and then decide what's true comes into play. I haven't thought too much about that, but
no, I think that was a nice answer. You're willing to serve them before you serve yourself. I appreciate that. All right, I will hand the mic over.
So if the school year's the ladder and the thesis is the short slide, what's the panel?
The panel is the gravel at the end of the slide that you end up
three
rolling.
big rocks sitting down there that have caught you so you can't escape. I like that. That's fair. Yeah. Cool. So I want to ask you a couple questions, I guess, some about just how we talk in general, and then some just the circumstances and environment surrounding conversations, because I think those play a role in it too. So I don't think this first question necessarily has a right or wrong answer, but I'm just interested to hear what you have to say. Do you think our culture over relies on verbal communication?
Interesting. What are the alternatives to verbal communication?
So I think, even when we're talking now, there's things we're kind of doing to, temper or tinker or, add to what we're saying, to enhance it, or I guess, present the information, through multiple avenues, body language is a way, you can enhance information, or having a visual aspect, to it as well. So, a book may have illustrations or something like that. So do you think that, verbal communication is, the top form we've got, or do you think that there are other things that may potentially be better we just don't consider as much? Like I said, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I'm just curious.
I do. I know this is supposed to be serious, but I'm imagining if y'all have ever seen Pacific Rim, where they just merge minds.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that's the highest form of communication. But for what we have, I'd say verbal communication is kind of the best that we can do, and it's our job to I guess as we go through life, get better at it and try and communicate better, I guess would be the word. And that communication comes from verbal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I phrased that perfectly, but...
No, I think that makes sense. I mean, I think it is the main way that people merge minds, I guess, too. And then, come to develop things or systems or, inventions that just become greater than the sum of their parts to some degree. And so I think that is a lot of the process of what we're doing. What are some of the other, features we add to conversation that you think are really helpful as well besides the verbal part? Like, what else should we be paying attention to?
I'd say, faces. People's faces change a lot,
mm-hmm.
and I'm really bad about that. If I say something that, or if I'm, lying, I have a really bad tell. I smirk a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I feel like reading faces is, one of those things or faces and body language entirely is one of those things. I'm not good at it,
mm-hmm.
is the problem. But, it's one of those things that if you are good at it, it can really enhance a conversation. It can really enhance your understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, and just, your felt, presence in a circumstance or room that, I'm actually here with you. I can be saying something, I have trouble with, I can be saying something but be, mentally somewhere else. And so, having all those things, working in tandem really help communication as well, for sure. So I guess circumstances of talking to people, what benefits do you think repeat interactions with somebody has?
I think that's where your understanding of them grows. It's very difficult to fully understand someone in, a 5-minute conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more and more you talk with someone, the better it's going to get. I think there's a reason that my longtime friends, I can understand them better. They say a weird meme and I immediately get it,
mm-hmm. instead
of just, okay, you're going to have to explain.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's where the benefit comes in. I think, especially with Mr. Fithian, I've had meeting with him every day or every week, multiple times a week, oftentimes. And I think I've gotten a lot better at communicating with him. We've gotten more information in more recent meetings than in the first one. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's valuable because it takes a lot of pressure off of you in any individual circumstance, to fully understand someone's perspective from that one conversation. It can be spread out across time. And I think when your mind's able to reduce its stress level and trying to process everything all at once because I have to understand right now, it's a lot more easier to be friendly and also just to understand because you're not processing as much or putting as much pressure on yourself. What do you do with people who are stubborn like you? And I'm stubborn too. So what happens when you run into somebody who they're willing to have a conversation with you, but they're also just pretty stubborn?
It kind of depends on your goals with the conversation. If I'm talking to myself, if I'm trying to, convince myself to do something...
Are you stubborn with yourself, too?
Yes, very.
Okay.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not gonna expand on that any. It's just kind of sad. But let's assume, I clone myself and I'm talking to myself.
Mm-hmm.
If I know I'm stubborn and I recognize that and I'm trying to convince myself to do something, I think... Interesting. I'm trying to think of ways on the fly of how would I communicate with myself, and every conversation that I think of with myself just goes poorly.
Mm-hmm. You could even think of it with robotics too. So if there's some sort of problem or engineering problem that you're encountering and you've tried a bunch of different ways to fix it and you just can't figure out a solution. It's almost like having writer's block or something like that too, where it's just I've tried over and over again to get this thing to work or say what I want to say, and I can't. So how do you end up resolving issues like that, or what are some ways that are helpful when you get in that situation?
Of course, that's what makes me understand the question, and I actually have an answer now. But you kind of just have to keep trying sometimes. I think there's a reason people repeat things a lot of times,
mm-hmm.
and there's a reason you rephrase it and you present it in a different way or you say it differently. And eventually, either one of those things is going to work or they're just going to stay stubborn.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it is. I think it's just about you kind of have to keep trying, and then if they do remain stubborn, it's kind of like, okay, well, maybe they just don't want to, and at that point, it's kind of, you be their friend and you love them. But
Yeah. So for someone who has like a pretty opposite perspective from you, or, I mean, even just kind of a troubleshooting problem like that, like, do you think there's always a way to map from point A to B, like, creatively? Or do you think sometimes, like, your premise just needs to be scrapped entirely?
Interesting. So, like, the different ways you can talk to them, is there times where you kind of you just have to give up and say, I've tried all these different routes, I've kind of got to scrap it? I think it depends on the situation. Sometimes, and I'm sure there's always going to be a possible route that you could take that would get them to understand, but we may not be able to get there, we may not understand it. And so I think in some circumstances it may be, if you are trying to like talk to someone and like, hey, here's what I find to be true and I disagree with this, and they just stay, you may have to say like, okay, maybe not. And it's circumstantial, I'd say.
So how do you think, you gave the example, was it a Buddhist or Hindu?
Hindu.
Okay.
I believe, yeah.
How do you think that that's a conversation that's like able to be effectively mapped from A to B, from like Christian to Hindu? Or do you think that you're going to have to get them to like use your terminology first before you can even have a conversation? Or is there like a win-win for both of you in there?
I feel like there is a win-win of like, if you do, you kind of just have to keep working to understand their perspectives. And I mean, that's through asking questions or doing this or doing that. And so eventually you are going to get to a point of like, okay, I understand you now. We can start going from there. Because I think even if it is just one person trying to see the perspective, once they do see that perspective, you're in the same lane as them at that point, right? You can now start to use their terminology. You can start to use language that they understand, and that, if that doesn't get you anywhere, it's kind of like, okay, well, But you can start going somewhere from there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Awesome. I will pass the mic to Mrs. Telsher.
Hello.
Hi.
I love the topic. But I have to ask, I know that you deal a lot with the Carver Kids. And how long have you worked with them over there?
I think since 9th grade. 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. Yeah,
13th,
that's 4.
14th, 15th.
Yeah, I was going to keep counting, and I kind of forgot what I was counting to.
So
4 years.
Do you think that you have matured in your ability to communicate with the Carver Kids on certain things the longer you've worked with them, or
I think most definitely. And with Carver Kids especially, because they're young, right? Having to like see from their perspective is really difficult, because a lot of times they see you and they're like, I want help, and I'm like, okay, cool, what's up? And they give me this problem that like I don't understand. They're talking about stuff that I just don't understand. And so I feel like I've grown my skills at least a little bit to where I can start to decipher stuff that they say. And I've gotten pretty good at seeing from their perspective of like, okay, that's your problem, not this. And like being able to get behind them and saying like, okay, I see what you're seeing. How may you fix that? And that's where you can start asking them questions that like can help them get to what they need.
And is maybe in their perspective something is a bigger problem than it is in your perspective?
Yes. I've done Legos for I think I was doing Legos since I was born. I in the hospital they gave me Legos, I'm sure. But I've done it for so long that problems, and I've helped them so much that it's been like, okay, I know the fix to that. I've experienced this before. But for them, they've never experienced that. And so sometimes it can be hard for me to be like, okay, I've done this a million times, right? I know that there's an easy fix, but stepping back and going, okay, you've never experienced this before. This is the biggest competition of your life. Let's see it. Okay, so now we can start getting a conversation.
Have you ever found yourself empathizing with the younger kids on their problems and thinking, yeah, I used to think that was a big problem too?
Yeah, a lot of times actually. One of the kids in gear this year at Carver, they had a really similar bot to one that I had whenever I was in like 5th grade, and I kind of went, oh, that, okay. And I think that's more nostalgia than empathy, but like, it was very cute.
You're having flashbacks. Oh, no, flashback. So I guess, does our perspective, is it something that's hardwired into us, or is it something that's flexible?
Are you saying like our perspective doesn't change, or like that our perspective is like, sorry. Go ahead.
No. I mean, it's, I guess my question is really, does our perspective change with age?
I think it can change like minutely. I think our perspective on anything can change in an instant. I mean, I told that story at the beginning because it did. My perspective did. It changed almost immediately after seeing robots, sit there for a whole match. We still see that, but I can't blame Wi-Fi anymore. I have to blame myself. Yeah. But it did. My perspective changed instantly, and I think that is how you go about life, is the perspective changes and adapts, and so.
Okay. Does our ability to communicate change with age?
Most certainly. I think as you grow up, you get to be a better communicator. That being said, there is, younger people that I know are amazing at communicating, and then you got the guy screaming at everyone who's terrible at it. So but I think in some way, shape, or form it does. It grows as you get older.
Okay.
Practice makes perfect.
Right. I have to ask about logic here at MCA.
Uh-oh.
Because I'm feeling this connection between perspective and like things like defining your terms. If I say, oh, I hate flying in airplanes, and you go, what? Airplanes are awesome. What's the problem with that argument? Is it really an argument, or what are we dealing with here?
I mean, what's the connection to logic there? Sorry.
Is there a term? Is there a term we need to define?
Okay, yeah. So I think that's the beauty of a conversation that you can have is, if you can jump to saying, okay, I love airplanes, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. But you can also say like, what airplanes, or maybe do you really hate it, or maybe, and even just asking why.
Yeah.
Even if you say why with a snarky tone, I mean, it still gets the.
Well, it made me think, because you're talking about trying to communicate with a Hindu, and there's terminology there that we might have to define. I might be talking about little bitty podunky airplanes, and you might be talking about a 747.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or something, and so we have this, apparent disagreement, but it's really probably not.
Yeah. And talking with Fithian in our meetings, another thing that I've gotten in the habit of doing was just saying what he said back to him. Like, he would tell me something, and I would, okay, so you're saying this. And so I'm putting it in my own words, and he could go, well, no, that's not what I'm saying. Or he could be like, yes. And so that's a skill, a tool that you could use to, get on the same page with someone, is just repeating what they said in your words. And so,
an effective way to communicate. As a parent, we often do that with our kids. Now, what did I just say? Repeat it back. I had a 3-year-old the other day tell me no. What did I just say? Okay, we have a barrier to communications at that point. I think I lost the argument, honestly. So it leads me to my next question. Can we really communicate with somebody who doesn't want to communicate?
I haven't really thought about that too much, but I don't think so. I mean, if they're sitting there going, no, they have their arms crossed, they're stamping their foot.
Yeah,
where
we're
they're,
done here.
Yeah. You can still try, of course, but I don't think there is there's not a conversation at that point.
Gotcha. Well, good. Thank you. I'll pass the mic.
I do like your echoing methodology. That's one that I learned, and have to admit I did not recognize you utilizing it. So good on you. Okay, a little lighter question. What kind of things are you looking outside of class when it comes to going to college?
Oh, see, I could talk about this a lot. This weekend, the school held cardboard boat races. So there's that. This is what you're talking about, right? Okay, just want to double check. Yeah, they held cardboard boat races. There was concrete boat races. which can lead to a good conversation about communication, because we were in a Clear Springs and my father was telling me, yes, it floats, Ryan. And I couldn't understand. I'm sorry, Dad, I still don't understand. It doesn't make sense. Because they were. It's okay. I'm going to get myself worked up. It doesn't make sense. But there is... School of Mines is exciting because there's a million things like that. There's ant weight battle bots. There's cardboard boat races, concrete boat races. I think they built an F1 car a couple years ago. They're making a Volkswagen Beetle electric. So there's just a list of stuff that I'm going to end up signing up for like 25 hours a day of stuff and end up going like, okay, this doesn't work, but, worth it.
Awesome. No, it's fun to hear that. Okay, you actually covered a couple of these questions I wanted to ask with Mrs. Tell's show, so I'm going to jump over here. I've got two quotes, one from a playwright and one from the Book of James. What do you want to talk about first?
I'll go with the Book of James.
Book of James. James 1, 19 and 20. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, for the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. Can you unpack that a little bit?
I mean, I think it goes along with what I was talking about with Mrs. Tell's show. I mean, if someone says, I don't like, or I hate flying in planes, you could jump to saying, you are wrong, sir. I enjoy planes. They are fun. Or you could ask why and listen and learn, and I think that goes hand in hand with communication and conversations. Is just sitting there listening, and maybe if they're asking questions, you provide them with your information instead of just going, "You sir are wrong."
So what does that do in the heart of the person you're talking to when you give them that response?
I mean, it allows them to open up. I mean, if you tell them you are wrong, they're gonna immediately lock up and shroud them or cover themselves in responses of like, well, no, I'm right, instead of saying, well, small planes have this problem and this, and so it opens them up to conversation and love and friendship.
Good. Sorry, what I keep coming back to in my head is the story we've been affectionately calling the Jesus bird.
Jesus bird story. I was trying to put that in my speach, and I didn't have time.
I was so hopeful.
I didn't have time. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Could you give us like a 1 minute rundown of I just think it's such a valuable story, and
right.
it relates so well.
All right, I'm going to try and remember. So there's this guy, right, and he's got this barn, and he sees a bunch of birds outside, and he sees on the weather app, okay, it's going to freeze this coming night, and he's like, okay, those birds are going to die unless I get them in the barn where it's warm. And so he's like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go open the barn doors. He does that. None of the birds go in. He puts seed down. None of the birds go in. He tries to shoo them in there, and it just doesn't work. And he thinks, if I could just become a bird, if I could just become one of those, stupid pigeons, and I could tell them, if I was a pigeon, I could tell them to get in the barn, and they would understand that it's going to be cold. But, he can't do that. And so the analogy comes in of, that's what Jesus did for us. That's what God did for us. He gave us Jesus, and Jesus came down as a man. So you have much better phrasing of it. I'm watching that story. I'm sorry.
That's wonderful. And apparently it's a very famous story from Paul Harvey. And when I told it to you, it was not as well done as he did it. So take heart. So what does that tell you about God and perspectives?
How do you mean?
What did he do in terms of perspectives in relation to us? When he wanted to have a conversation with us.
Yeah.
So what did he do?
I mean, he did what none of us could do. He did the Pacific Rim mind combining thing. He came down as a man. He got the same perspective as us, so that way we could understand. He brought us to what we needed to be at. There's many people who could phrase that more elegantly, but I think I got the main point in.
Yes, very much so. Okay, The quote that I found is from a man named George Bernard Shaw. He was an Irish playwright. And he said, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place." Any reactions to that thought?
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening. But
Well played, sir.
thank you. But communication doesn't happen if you're just, not trying.
Where does the illusion come in?
I don't really know. I'm trying to think of it. I think the illusion comes in whenever you don't look for feedback, maybe. If you're just telling someone something, from my eyes, I'm telling you it, you should understand. But, I'm kind of covering up anything you're thinking by just my words. I'm just spewing words at you. And from my perspective, I see all those words coming at you. You should understand, but you may not. And so,
Yeah, no, that's a quote that has stuck with me over the years. The further you go in life, the more opportunities you'll have to be duped by this illusion, and you think you've communicated, and then you find out a day later that that's not really what happened, and you have to double back. And yeah, that's an important concept. Okay, I'm good. Thank you for answering those questions.
Did you like Pacific Rim 2?
no.
Okay.
Not one
answer.
bit.
Good answer. Okay. So there's... I just had to check. It's because it's come up like twice so far. I was like, I wonder if you saw the second one.
Haven't seen it in like a year, but for some reason it's come up twice in my oral. So,
Nice.
Powerful
That's
movie.
fair. Well, you... Okay, so there's a stereotype which I think is pretty true that men like enjoy things and women are like are more interested in people. And so it's interesting you having a thesis where it's like about communication and relationships, because I actually think I fall more on the side of being more interested in things than people a lot of the time. And so what is it that like makes you keep coming back to people, and what surprises you about them?
Me personally, or like people in general coming back to people?
You personally.
Me personally? I haven't really thought of that. It's interesting. I guess the reason I personally come back to people a lot of times is because I'm trying to think of something I do. I just never thought of this before. It's interesting. I think people come back to people because, God did. He put that love in our heart for him and his creation. But me personally, it's that. But there's also... I've kind of like... I'm sorry, this is probably really boring to watch, just me sitting here thinking. I think the reason I come back to people is because I like to sit in my room and do nothing a lot. Mm-hmm. And I like to think that's what I like. But being, in the den with my family, or in the kitchen with my family, it's nice. It makes me happy. It brings me joy. Mm-hmm. So
that's cool. And I think that's something I've seen a lot like more in you over your time at MCA too, just like in robotics as a leader, and then even just with a lot of students in between classes, I see you like giving people piggyback rides and stuff like that, and you have inside jokes with a lot of people. And so I think I've seen you more, even when you were in physics class with me in 10th grade, like you were always interested in like helping other people because you had your work done early a lot of the time, and you'd help other people in class. And so I've seen that more in you over the years of just like coming back to people, and I can tell it's something like you really do care about, and so I appreciate that in you.
I'd like to clarify about the piggyback rides. Those are from Avani, and that's just him jumping on me.
It still counts.
It still counts, yeah.
You let it happen. Okay, so I asked you, what about people surprises you the most or you like the most? What about engineering do you like the most?
Normally, my answer is like, I like to see it work. But the more I work on different stuff, the more I realize I think I just like the process of like those mini accomplishments within each of them, you know, like building that BattleBot. I think most of y'all were here for that, but like building that BattleBot, my only job was like this gearbox, right? And it didn't accomplish much and it didn't do much on its own, but like once I built that, it was like I carried it around for like probably 10 minutes because I was like, I made this. I'm happy. And so it is. I think it's for robotics. It is. It's just like I did this. You know, my own two hands, and like I did this, and it makes me happy because it works.
Yeah.
And so.
And then, what's your favorite machine or creation from SciFi?
From SciFi? See, I think I'm required to say the Pacific Rim, like, what are they called? Jaegers? Yeah. It's going to be Star Wars, obviously. And I'm going to say it's Count Dooku's ship from the Clone Wars, because of the solar sails. It's just really cool, because we're actually working on that in real life now.
Yeah.
So it's really cool.
That's awesome. Cool. Okay, so we've talked about like communicating like one-on-one with individuals, but knowing you're also in robotics, like how does communication change when you're like leading a group or a team?
I think my strategy with it is to try and break it into people, because I'm not that great in a crowd of like doing that, and so my strategy and like the way my communication changes is I try and break it into this person, this person, this person, this person, and it's worked so far. I mean, the bus barn hasn't caught on fire, so I mean, there's that. But I don't think I have a place to talk about that because I am nowhere near that skill or nowhere near understanding of that skill. But my strategy is it's just break into individual people. What's your job? What's your job? What's your job? Let me talk to you. 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 So
yeah, that's basically my strategy too, because I'm really bad at in parties or in crowds or stuff, and so
Exactly.
if I can have something where they're coming to me one at a time, it makes it a lot easier. So I understand that. Cool. Do you think loving someone is the same thing as understanding them, or like do you need to understand someone in order to love them?
I think I may misquote this, but like God tells us to love everyone unconditionally, right? So I mean, I don't think you need to understand them to love them, but I think as we understand them, we can love them more, and our love for them grows as we understand them better.
Cool. Let me see what else I had. Yeah, and I guess some of that is just like, even if you may not necessarily understand the person initially or even ever, like, what is some of the common ground you have between anybody?
So like, what's a universal like topic, I guess, of conversation? Like, I think, Or just like what's something everybody values regardless of where they're from or their age or who they are. I'm trying to think of that, and nothing's coming to mind. I'm sure there's like an obvious answer that like Pacific Rim. I'd say this is gonna sound really corny, but the only thing I can think of is like laughter, and like smiling and like being happy. Like, I mean, they may disagree on like, you know, what makes them happy or what makes them smile, but like kind of a universal, like what they agree on is good is like, you know, smiling, laughter, and happiness. That sounds like it's like on I'm pretty sure that's on a sign in my house. It's like live, laugh, love. Yeah.
You got the laugh part down, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice, yeah. No, I think that's good, and I think that makes sense, because, I mean, there's people in this room that I don't even know, but I've been, you know, listening to you and laughing this whole time, too, and so there's a community that's been created because that's happened here, and so I do think there's something about that that's universal, and we both understand enough to laugh and have that same reaction, and so that is a common ground we have, despite the fact I've never had a conversation with, you know, some people in my life, so Cool. Right, and then last question, and then I'll pass it on to Mrs. Telshow. What's something that you've learned from somebody who you still have a pretty different perspective from, but you were able to take something valuable from them, even though they didn't change your mind overall?
I'd say someone who I just have talked to that I had a really different perspective from. I've kind of lived my entire life in Midland, so I'm trying to like think of people because they at least have somewhat similar views. I think I'm thinking the most like other point of view that I've seen is like politically, and not gonna say anyone specific, but it's like there's friends and there's different people who they have just different political views, whether it's one extreme or the other, and just like talking to them, I can kind of like, oh, okay, let me just grab all this knowledge and like condense it, and I think that's beneficial. And it doesn't just apply to politics, but it applies to a lot of stuff of like, everyone here, like, they're not too different from me, but like they all have different something. I can kind of just like pull this knowledge and collect all of it. I sound like a gremlin, like stealing people's knowledge, but like,
Awesome.
Okay, so it begs the question, because I'm kind of a sci-fi geek. What is your favorite sci-fi series?
I heard Pacific Rim in the background. I was worried that was a voice in my head.
It might be after today.
It might be. I'm going to go to sleep and it's Pacific Rim, Pacific Rim, Pacific. No, it's Star Wars. I was trying to think to make sure, like, is there anyone in here who would get mad at me for saying that? No, it's Star Wars. It's 100% Star Wars, yeah.
Do you even watch Star Trek?
No.
Okay.
No.
Where do I go from here? Okay.
No, I watched one of your other panels and you mentioned Hobbit and Narnia, and I was like, I was going to warn you that I haven't read either of those, but, like, I kind of forgot to.
And you've made it through MCA?
Oh, yeah.
Without?
Yeah.
How?
I have avoided... If I hear The Hobbit, I turn around.
You're missing out, man. You're missing out. So, you said something about why? You said your friends have all pretty much similar perspectives than you have. Can you think of a friend that's really, really different, with different perspectives that you call a friend? No names, just yes or no.
I'm sure there is. But whenever I am talking with them, we generally have conversations that are less than like, let's talk about religion. It's more, stupid,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word. And so normally those perspectives don't come out more. But yeah, I think there are. I think a lot of my friends they have different perspectives and different views on stuff.
Okay, well, I'm assuming that here at MCA you've had the opportunity to debate a few times. Has your ability to tolerate other people's perspectives matured from your time here?
I think most definitely. I think when I was younger, like, I was a narc. Like, I was I was that annoying kid that would, like, teacher, he said this. And so I think, like, growing up, I've kind of realized, like, okay, you know what, that's cool.
Yeah.
And, like, not tolerate, but, accept it and, like, okay, yeah, you see this differently than me. You think, you think Biden's a good president. You're wrong, but, like, I can accept your
lead with
perspective.
That, Well, I have to ask, because you're talking about communicating and you're talking about barriers to communication. How about speaking truth in love to someone? What are some tips on how to do that well? Can you think of anything?
I think the problem is I'm not skilled in that area, or I don't have practice in that area very often. I try and be loving in a lot of my conversations, and I try and be open to people. But I don't know about speaking truth and love to people. Like, I'm not that great at speaking to people. I'm very, here's this robotics story. Let me make you laugh, and then let me run away.
Well, I think you hit on it. I think being loving is the first step to speaking truth to somebody who's maybe struggling with something. But I love your diagram here. I have to ask, because to me, he's got this really cool diagram in his oral talking about analytical, driver, amiable, and expressive. I can't look at this thing without thinking of different phone conversation skills. So,
Interesting.
yeah. If you have to have a phone conversation with someone, you could probably pick any one of these depending on what your goal is. But I have to ask, I'm a mom. I'm usually pretty amiable, and you said emotions can make you shift along this. What's an example?
I use the example of mine being I'm more analytical, but in the bus barn and robotics I shift to more driver orientated. I become very telly.
Telly?
Yeah, Ava, get me a zip tie.
Okay.
I asked her that one time at a dance because I was curious, and she pulled out a zip tie. I don't know if she's here. She's not. That's sad.
Wow.
I was expecting to get a zip tie thrown at me, like hit me in the back of the head. But
Well, I go home with like all kinds of stuff in my pockets after robotics, and if you told me that 10 years ago that I would find gears in my pockets when I went home, I wouldn't believe you. But yeah, this is awesome. I'm going to pass it on.
We're at time, right? Okay. So, it's your turn, Ryan.
all right. So I believe it was someone came up to me and said, "You got to ask one of the teachers about Clash of Clans or Clash Royale." And Mr. Fithian, I'm very much aware that you play Clash Royale too, and so I have to ask: do you find any metaphors in Clash Royale for communication or anything else?
I don't know where to begin. Trying to come up with something clever. I assume you're not talking about the chat feature, but like within the gameplay itself.
I feel like that can apply.
Okay. It's a format that's wonderful for telling and not for two-way communication. This probably won't make sense to most of the people here, but you can join a clan and then share that you just defeated someone from that clan and then leave the clan. And it's one of my, it's just, why did that just happen? I don't, it's a weird vehicle for community. Okay, so you can, and there's another weird thing you can do, which is if you're obviously going to win a match, you can just throw a spell in the corner, and that's a really harsh burn. I'm wasting resources, and I'm beating you that badly. So most of the communication ends up being negative. Is probably what I found with most online games. They're not a great format for interacting with people in uplifting ways, which I do I find that to be a travesty. I do think God created us for relationship, and I do think technology can be used for that. And I don't think it's an accident that Genesis starts in a garden and Revelation ends in a city. I think God is the master engineer, if you want to use that. And so, you still just really threw me off. No, I think communication is a lovely topic and gets to some of the very hearts of reality. And Clash is a
Pit of despair.
It's an excellent case study in the depravity of humanity.
I know a bunch of 7th graders and 8th graders that play that game with me, and so I'll have them okay, so if you're playing this in class, quote Mr. Fithian, you're researching.
Yeah, it's a spiritual research project.
For Mrs. Henson, I had a question. So you taught me advanced physics, and those are hard classes, you know. And so how have you learned to better communicate with kids that are having problems with it and struggling with it?
I think some of it comes from teaching all grade levels here to some degree, that a lot of the ideas that you're communicating, even in a class like physical science, all the way up to advanced physics, it's the same principles, you're just adding another layer. I think having experience with that, working on, having experience with the practical side of it as well, because sometimes people can go full theoretical or full analytical or full practical with it. And I think the fact that, just working on planes or cars or stuff like that and kind of being able to physically put it into practice helps people as well. The doodling aspect of just drawing pictures on the board is helpful too. And then I think over time as I've grown, I've just learned that even principles we see in math and physics that we would think are isolated from the other parts of life actually exist in other hobbies or things, just kind of in a different form and maybe to a different application. And so kind of varying my personal hobbies, I guess, kind of gives me a way that all areas of my life kind of circularly inform each other, if that kind of makes sense. And so it gives me a lot of points of convergence to be able to teach something from, rather than just trying to teach it one specific way all the time. And it also helps me relate to a wider range of people
Interesting
overall, so if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But every year I do try to edit my curriculum and figure out how could I say things better stuff. But I think a lot of just my practical real world experience is more what's helpful than just kind of looking at the document of my lesson plan being how do I get this better.
Awesome. And for Mrs. T, you have 3 masters, you can play the bagpipes, and you do all this stuff. What is your advice going into college? Because I know there's a bunch of seniors here, there's juniors that are going to go to college. What would you say is a good piece of advice for college? Because you've learned so much over these years.
Don't skip class. Remember, each class costs you about $50. Yeah, but it's true. I'm a parent now. I can say that. There goes my paycheck every month.
Yeah, if I want to sleep in one morning, I'll just have a lighter and a $50 bill.
Yeah, don't do it. Don't do it. Attend every class. Get to know your professors. Read the book when you get it. So many tidbits of advice. But most of all, even if it's a really hard class, because you're going to be faced, I think, for the first time, you're going to be running with the big dogs. And so you'll find that there's everybody that's in your class is as smart or even smarter than you. And if you're humble and you can see that and be okay, I know I'm just going to have to hit the ground running, and that first couple of months is critical. You develop the habits, and you overwork those first couple of months. You have that first round of tests, and that's it. I did great, or I did not great. And, just be humble about the whole thing and just say, I'm here to learn and enjoy it and get to know your professors and just love to learn.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think you did a great job. And I get to go last because, sadly, I think this is the last time I really get to talk to you on a mic. So I remember 8th grade Ryan.
No,
I do.
I don't.
I remember 8th grade Ryan, and it's I think 8th grade Ryan was hey, this school has a cool robotics program, and there's a nice school attached to it too.
Entirely. Yes.
Yeah, and I think you've done a flip, because I see you as a scholar, and you are joyful, you are fun, you invest in people a lot. I've watched you out there in the barn with these younger guys, and I just love the way you see humor and everything. And Ryan's the kind of guy, hey, let's make a mini bot and let's make it fly and let's do that. Your zest for life and just seeing the fun part of things has been so fun. You're part of the reason my experience in the bus barn has been a very positive one. And I don't know, you have a legacy to leave, and that's saying something. So I'm going to close this with prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for today. Thank you for Ryan. Thank you for his heart and his ability to fellowship with us and have a good time and share some good information at the same time. We pray that he has a good college experience, as all these other seniors, and we leave them in your very capable hands. In your name we pray. Amen.